Well, hello everybody. I'm so excited today to be speaking with Jenny Lynn, who I first met well, it must be a couple of months ago now, when Jenny, you did a very inspiring interview on Raylan Eagle's channel. And I got in touch and suggested we maybe have a conversation because it occurred to me we have so much in common in terms of we both work with a similar client group, people with CFSME, but we have a very different way of working with them. So I'd love it if you could just tell people a little bit about yourself, how you got into doing this work with people, and kind of what it is about this work that excites you.
Right. Hi. Yeah. Thanks, Tricia. I don't know how far back to go. I mean, I can start with the ME CFS work and where that
Yeah.
started, or I can go further back.
Well, let's start there and then see if
See if
that
it comes back a bit.
leads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, I was new in practice. I'd only been in practice literally 6 months when I came across my first client with ME CFS. I had no idea what it was. I didn't pretend to know what it was. She only wanted help for her anxiety. So I thought, well, that's about all I can work on anyway. So I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna pretend I know what's happening. Um, and I helped work on her anxiety. And because of the place I was in at that time, I was in this place of sort of massive spiritual expansion. I was in this huge transformative phase of myself at the time. I was able to dig quite deep, not only into her and what the relationship was between her anxiety and her ME/CFS, but into me as well, so that I could really hold the space for her so she could explore it. That means I have to be mature. So I have to be mature in my approach. Yeah, I have to not bring my own anxieties and my own fears into the therapy room. I have to be mature and hold that space for her. So that was the transformation that I was going through at that time. So it was serendipitous, if you like, that I meet this client group through her. And at the same time, I'm going through this deep grounding into myself. So I kind of started to identify that because my life was transforming so much at the time just by standing on the ground, metaphorically and physically. I knew there were answers in my journey for the people that I was working with. So, so she started to improve. She started to understand how her anxiety was not only maintaining her CFS, but in some aspects creating it. And on the back of her, she came through the doctor because the doctor didn't know what to do. I had about half a dozen other people come through. Um, I you probably identify with this, Patricia. You know, like you're cautious. You don't want to overlay everything you've learned with one client with everyone.
Mm.
So you sit back and you wait. You wait for
Mm.
them to deliver whatever it is that they've got to say. But with just half a dozen or so people, might have been a few more, I don't remember now, the patterns became so clear. They were so common to everyone I spoke to. In the end, I had to conclude, even just with 6 people, there was something going on that this client group could have something so much in common was just not a coincidence.
Yeah.
Um, so that led me sort of to just explore and develop and do a lot of reflection and personal work to understand, what is the solution? How do we get people out of this? What do I need to do? Well, how do I need to engage with people with chronic fatigue so that they feel safe enough to explore and not feel rejected and not feel over anxious and worried about what I might be thinking of them, etc., etc. So that was my journey working with this client group. It was a journey of discovery for me, as much as it was a discovery for them. And I think, we often say you teach what you need to learn.
Indeed.
And I
Yeah.
think, I was just in that serendipitous time where it was all coming together and I was sort of like, wow, so I was learning this stuff. How do I teach it? So
Mm.
that was how it started, really.
Yeah. That's an echo in my story, really, was sort of being new in doing therapy and then meeting this client group, and for me the big aha moment was seeing that most of them had trauma, finding out that anxiety, like you said, was very much inbuilt into the system. Like they were usually highly sensitive people. They had a great deal of responsibility, perhaps in life. They'd taken on a lot of emotional responsibility for other people, maybe, and they didn't know how to process that. So yeah, the patterns are so interesting, and yeah, it starts to make you aware that there is something going on that's bigger than the individual, if you like. And I think that's really where we can start to be the most effective, is by, yeah, obviously we're interacting with a person, not a condition, but we're also seeing those all important commonalities that enable us to maybe draw certain conclusions and help people more effectively. Because I have to say, and this sort of leads to my next question, is you mentioned that, you know, there wasn't, the doctor didn't have any idea, and that certainly when chronic fatigue syndrome was first kind of being diagnosed, there was very little on offer. And so what I'd like to ask you is, how does your approach differ then from the mainstream model? You've kind of intimated there's a bit more going on here than meets the eye.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's an approach, but it's very interwoven into my character. It's very hard to isolate it and say, well, this is how I'm doing it, and so I want you to do it like this, you know. So a number of years ago, maybe might have been 2012, I went and had some coaching with someone to try and make a business, like a proper, you know, business out of what I was doing. And she said to me, you need to have a model. You need to have something that people can buy off the peg and work through on their own. Now, I tried it. I tried to pull something together, but I thought, you know, part of the reason that people have this condition is because nobody sees them. Nobody really witnesses them. Nobody can sit and hold the space and be with them. And I'm not sure my program is actually going to reach that spot. You know, this is a nurture thing. This is a kind of a holding space. It's a kind of, how do I rework this stuff and feel safe enough to do it? And often with programs that they buy off the peg, it's serendipitous or coincidental if they happen to be in a space that they can work through this and feel safe doing it.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I couldn't divorce my approach from who I am, but I did try and teach it, and I did do quite a few, maybe 8 or 9 different workshop groups to try and teach my colleagues how to do it. And what I found was that the biggest gift, I suppose, that I might have helped them with and that I present with my clients is just that ability to sit with whatever comes up, the compassion and the acceptance.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you ever came across Winnicott in your training, Patricia, but Winnicott was I think he was 1940s, 1950s psychologist who said what we really need to do is reparent our clients, which means they were poorly parented the first time around. So how do we parent them? So what are the qualities of a parent? They're holding the space. They're letting the child free. They're letting the child free to play, but keeping a safe boundary for them to play within. So I suppose my approach is not only parental in the kindest possible way and the most supportive possible way, but it's kind of permissive, and it's kind of working on more than one level. But that's because I work on more than one level. Do you know what I mean? I can be very intellectual and very cognitive, but I can also be very heart-centered and empathic and compassionate. So I think that's where it differs from other approaches. I don't want to be clinical. This is an art, not a science. So the clinical nature of this needs to go.
Oh, I so agree.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I don't want to over labor it, but I think we have got to the point now where we're so striving as therapists to kind of prove ourselves that we just acquire more tools, and we get this sort of clinical mindset. And actually, what a person is coming to you for is exactly what you said: to be witnessed, to be held,
Yeah.
to be seen in the eyes of a safe other.
Mm. Mm.
And I love the fact that you bring, yes, the cognitive and the heart centered. We need both, of course we do.
Mm.
But there's so little of that that goes on generally in both the conventional medical sector and also some alternative sectors that are trying to sort of elevate themselves, like, and prove how much they know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what a beautiful
Yeah. And
combination.
that does seem to be a real problem in all of our healing models in the West, at least, is that, unless you've got a white coat on and you're clinical, you're just useless.
Yeah.
But what this actually does is it outsources our ability to help ourselves.
Yes.
So instead of
Indeed.
helping ourselves, we trust the white coats. And, I technically might be a white coat, but I don't want to work in a clinical way. I find it very tedious. It's very boring for me. It's not creative and expansive enough. It's just very boring.
Yeah.
Um,
I think tuning into a new way of working is very much how I've been moving professionally and personally, because I've, like you, been learning a lot about the world and myself and my place in this and my spiritual nature, and moving more and more away from the tools and techniques and more towards this presence, and allowing someone to be creative and in the flow of their own experience. And our job, I feel, is very much to guide that rather than impose our view of what should be happening. And for me, there is almost a divine feminine going on here. And every time you're talking, I'm noticing you touch your heart center, right? Because you're wearing a pendant that presumably has some connection with that. And when I was modeling myself after training, I wanted to find someone who worked in the way I wanted to work, and all the models were very clinical. And I found a lady called Virginia Satir, who was a family therapist from the 1980s and 90s, who just totally blew me away in her approach. When you weren't supposed to connect with your client at all, you were supposed to sit back, and observe, hand on chin and nod a lot. She didn't. She would take their hands when they came in and she would say, "You're so welcome. Oh, please sit down," or, just notice what's going on in your body there. And it was a totally different way of working that I just felt intuitively guided towards, rather than this clinical kind of headspace method. And it seems like when you're working, at least from what I can tell, how you describe it, is your connection is way more important than anything. And so how do you kind of see your spirituality guiding that? Is that something that you're kind of aware of when you're working?
Good question. I think the problem with spiritual and spirituality is that people understand different things by it. And if I might just define the term before I talk about it, then it might, so because otherwise we're in woo-woo world and we don't really understand
No,
what's.
indeed.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And I don't want to go into woo-woo, but the way I understand spirituality is to know your place, to know your purpose, to know where you belong. I belong here, whether it's alone or in a community. I know who I am and I belong here. And I'm in service. All of me is focused in my being right now. And my job is to take up my space in the world and offer my gifts for the benefit of others. That's my spiritual purpose, if you like. And it's what I would call spirituality. It's knowing who you are. It's being grounded. Now, there is transcendent spirituality where you can go and sit on a mountain and bypass and do all kinds of lovely transcendental stuff. Fabulous. But how do you live your spirituality on a daily life? You know who you are, you know what you're about, you know where your feet are on the ground, and you know what your gifts are and how to offer them to people. So, am I aware of my spirituality as I'm working? I'm very aware that I'm super focused. I'm really focused. I'm listening with my heart. My ears are just tools, but what I'm really hearing is with my heart. So I'm trying to hear what people aren't saying. I'm trying to hear what they mean in throwaway comments that to them they've probably repeated 1,000 times, and are effectively meaningless, but to me carry a lot of weight. So I'm trying to look for ways to find their wholeness. I'm looking for their wholeness because I know don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I'm still on my journey, but I know, there's a wholeness within me and I know it's possible. So I'm always looking for their wholeness, so I'm aware that as they're talking, I'm looking for a way in. I'm looking for a connection with them in some way so that they can connect with me. So I suppose if that's how I might use my spirituality, understanding that spirituality is just being here right now, present. I'm using it all day long, every day. I am living my spirituality in the sense of this is my place, this is my purpose, this is where I am. And my gifts to the world is to really hold space for people and to see the wholeness within them so that they can start to believe in themselves as well.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, thank you for defining your version, because it's all things to all people, and it's a difficult word to use without people jumping to conclusions that we're talking about something else entirely. I think it is the heart-centered presence. I think being able to be with someone in their pain without being drawn into their pain means you have to have a very strong groundedness in your own personhood. What you said about belonging, I thought was really important. I belong, I know who I am, I know what my purpose is. And that has really been part of the journey for me, is to, through my practice, funnily enough, my personal practice, but also professional, is to find more and more what it is I'm here to do and to refine that. And it does seem to be to witness people in their journey, be able to hold them so that they don't disintegrate into fear, which is what most often happens when you're trying to work through these very difficult experiences on your own. So it's a profound thing that you do, which is kind of why I wanted to reach out, was because I don't often meet people who work on this level. And you and I have probably experienced professionals who work in much more, formulaic ways. And I am just becoming more and more passionate about throwing out the rule book and saying, let's start with this, because this is what's coming up for me right now when I'm listening to you. And it's an almost intuitive sense of where that person is. And as you said, what they're not telling you. And I don't know if you get this, but I often get a sort of inkling or a suggestion pops in, ask them about this, or tell them what you're noticing, because it's something that your brain is picking up, because you're so focused on them that it becomes like a second sense, if you like, to know what you're not hearing and what they are trying to convince themselves of or cover up in their presentation to you of who they are, which of course is the adaptive self, not the real self. And who's the real self underneath that? That's the bit I want to tease out with love, with humor, with compassion. We have a lot of fun in sessions. And I really encourage that for people, that it shouldn't be so serious and so, like project get well, it's got to be something that draws them in inexorably to finding out their truth. And that can be illuminating, joyous, as well as sometimes painful. So I always say to people, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's a matter of following your kind of inner knowing and having someone kind of enjoy bring that out for you without being afraid of what you will find. Because fear often will keep you constricted and shut down, and that's what CFSME is to me. It's a chronic state of shutdown, both at the cellular level and at the psychic level. It's a holding place, a stasis, and it's our job to kind of reach in and ask, where did you learn that was necessary? What does it feel like to reach out and connect with someone? So I think it's such brilliant intuitive work, and so few people are doing it in that way. So it's a joy to meet someone else, which is why I wanted to reach out. And I just wanted to ask, what are we seeing in the world right now that conflicts with that? Because there's so much going on, isn't there, that doesn't fit this intuitive knowing and this connectedness.
It's fascinating. I mean, if I might just sort of comment on what you just said.
Sure.
I loved what you said about this idea of Project Get Well. We've got to, and what you find with MECFS people is, I've got to get well. I'm going to do everything to get well, and they put so much pressure on themselves to just get well. And I don't know who it was. It was one of my clients this week that said to me, "Do you know what? I've stopped trying, and as I'm stopping trying, I'm just unfolding naturally." And I'm like, oh,
hallelujah, yeah.
Goodness, stop trying so hard. Let's just let go instead of try. And I loved what you said about the shutdown, like the fear shutdown, like a holding space. That's exactly what's happening. It's kind of like, I'm not meant to be here, like parts of me have fled, the idea of soul retrieval, parts of me have fled away because I can't come out of hiding because I'm not whole yet. I can't really face the world because I'm not a complete being. And that shutdown, that fear, it was so poignant, I thought. So I just wanted to comment on that. Thank you for that. But yeah, what's going on in the world at the moment? I mean, anything and everything, isn't it? Sort of like anything to lead you away from your inner knowing. The media, the division, the divide and conquer, the fear mongering, the wars, the pharmaceuticals, the free speech issues going on in the UK, all the media that we know is false around, who's right and who's wrong, and these riots and that riot. And you think, my goodness, if you were looking from the outside, you would think England was in flames, and it's not. No. But let's capture the minds of people. Let's capture a narrative, and let's keep them hooked into something that is totally irrelevant to their health and well-being. So I think the world, what's going on in the world at the moment is like, just don't look inside. Don't look inside. Don't go anywhere near what you know, because we know best. This kind of on a plate, authoritarian, we know what's best for you. Don't listen to yourself. So, it's no surprise whatsoever that long COVID is such an issue now, because it's going to affect people that are vulnerable to that way of being in the world. Of being scared, of wanting to listen to other people before me. It's gonna cause that. And then prior to even COVID being around, you're looking at shouldn't even use that word, should I really? But prior to that being around, we've probably never seen more disconnection from self than we are seeing today. Because we're so hooked into a narrative, we're so hooked into something that is external, and we are so used to externally referencing and getting our value and our opinions
from others and from the society. Yes, I think we're seeing that more and more with social media as a big driver for me. I've been writing about that recently, just the whole idea that you have to compare yourself with so many other people who are all presenting this perfect vision, but there's no true connection because you don't really know these people, and there's no accountability. We've got that going on. We've got the gender wars, the right to self-declare, the idea that the gender that you have at birth may not be the one that you truly feel inside, which whilst, I've struggled with self-identity, over the years, it feels very polarized. It feels like you're either for or against. You're vile if you disagree, or you have some intermediate view that might enable us to actually dialogue. We're seeing so much division, aren't we, in the world, and it feels to me like this heart-centered approach that looks inside and says, what do I feel, what do I want, who am I, might enable us to take a breath and disconnect from outside approval, which by its very nature is going to favor the majority, kind of the loudest view. It's not nuanced, it's not individualized, and maybe be able to be yourself in an arena that allows for diversity, true diversity, which, by the way, doesn't mean we all agree with each other. That diversity is about allowing for others' opinions without needing to be right all the time. And I actually think that's linked to health and well-being, because, like you said, people who are in that fix-it mindset and just want to get well have lost the flexibility of not knowing, of being okay with uncertainty. Uncertainty is one of the biggest negotiations that we make when we get ill, because we do not know the end point. Because modern medicine doesn't have a solution for these kinds of conditions, whether anxiety, chronic fatigue, pain, whatever it is. It just has a series of symptom management options, which you take or you don't, depending on what you're advised and how much you believe that these options are going to help you. Often I find people coming to me after they've exhausted all the options, and I have to get them out of that fixed mindset, whatever that is, and get into the idea that there is no obvious yes, that's right and that's wrong, that there is this gray area in the middle that we have to negotiate together. And so I see kind of the model that we're working in as a model not just for health in this arena, but in well-being for I don't want to make it sound bigger than it is, but for the world in a way, because this dance with uncertainty is what really gives people true flexibility in their options for life. And so anyway, that's kind of how I see it going on, and we've lost that.
I agree with you. And just as you were talking then, a few ideas came up that I've shared before, but this idea of following the narrative and people getting sucked into them and us, and we're the greenies and you're the right-wing fascist environment destroyers, and we've got it right and you've got it wrong, and all of the issues that are coming up with gender and environment and pharma and everything that's going on in the world, and the wars and stuff, and who's taken a side, whose side are you on, This is directly counter to being true to yourself and finding your place and your purpose in the world, because you're being led by a narrative, you're being led away from who you really are by fear and anxiety and disaster, all of this propaganda. So this whole sort of communitarian mass culture thing that is like, it's like the sea we're swimming in at the moment, and if you're not with it, you're de facto right-wing fascist. Gosh, hang on a minute, I seem to remember not even 7 or 8 years ago I was on the left. I haven't changed my views.
No.
So how is it I'm suddenly on the right? I just don't get it. I don't get it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
It's phenomenal.
We've seen that in such a short time.
Yeah. But this because the tide is moving with the mass culture, the media. The power of the media is incredible. So, to coin a term, wokeism.
Yes. Oh, I hate the term, but I have to.
It's directly in contra to taking personal responsibility and being conscious and awake, because you're being led by an ideology, a system of thought,
that you have to adhere to, regardless of your personal qualms or questions around it. And yes, so when I first heard that term woke, I found it very offensive, because I saw it as a way of attacking people who were socially oriented, who wanted justice for others, etc. But I have seen it morph into this ideology that actually repels me to some huge degree. And I've also seen my politics kind of suddenly be de facto defined in a new way, because I don't agree with any ideology, because an ideology allows no individual consensus, any idea of nuance. It is fixed, and that's exactly the opposite to what is healthful and healing. So you can kind of see how we've become, well, we're kind of in the vanguard in some way of this a movement that says you can disagree and still be loved. You can operate in a gray area and still be whole, because you are negotiating what works for you, because it's your inner voice that matters. And some people might think, well, that's very woo-woo, you know, talking of woo-woo. But for me, the more you can connect with a greater knowing, which, by the way, although we're talking about the inner voice, of course, it's connected to everything else. And so it's a collective consciousness, not just your own, that you're tuning into, is really what may save the planet, because it allows us to have a collective responsibility for each other rather than just for ourselves, and feeling that we have to have the right attitude, which has been dictated by other people. And so it's about coming into your own groundedness and your own foundation, isn't it? And you Absolutely. And I would probably find that we have maybe some differences in opinion, but that wouldn't stop us from connecting. I wouldn't want to polarize you into my enemy because you disagree with me. I would merely want to find out, why is it you believe what you believe, and are there some ways in which we can kind of agree to disagree, you know?
Or crossovers. There may be
crossover. Yeah, exactly. And that's the dance of wholeness, and the one which I'm engaged in, as I say, through my personal and professional practice. And so being of service to the world, really, by how we present ourselves, how can we, this is a bit provocative, but how can we as women particularly make a big difference? Because often our voices, particularly when you're a certain age, our voices tend to be less heard if we look at the media currently and who's really being listened to right now. How can we enhance that?
I think we have to be the leaders of that female, feminine consciousness. And I'm referring to people like yourself and myself who are working with heart. And we are the elders. We are the ones that society doesn't want, because we shine a light on what's wrong. And, you know, society wants to marginalize the elders because it's more convenient to keep everybody under the spell of the latest thing or the latest ideology. And I think the best thing we can do is just hold that space. Let's just hold the space. Let's be the wise women that we are. Let's unashamedly do our work in the world, as crones and you know, wise women. Let's do that. Let's show people how it is to put our roots into the earth. What does it mean to be rooted, grounded? What does that mean to be like that? You know, what an amazing example for the young people to be able to follow. And I meet young people and people, you know, especially the last few months, I've had dozens and dozens of people through. You know, what a great example to actually live what you believe and to show people that they can do it. We might not change the world tomorrow. We might not, you know, we are few, but I think we're powerful because we live our truth. And I think the more, you know, my mission, if you like, with all the people that I'm working with, is to encourage them and inspire them to have agency. You have agency. You don't have to wait for anyone to give you permission. That doesn't mean you railroad over everyone, but it means, you know, you are your boss. It's you that's in charge. And if I can inspire just half the people I'm working with to take up residence, mostly women, as you know, MECFS is mostly women. But if I can inspire people to really transform their lives, they're transforming other people's lives, you know.
Then it has momentum.
It has momentum and they can't stop it. This is it. You know, the powers that be cannot stop this momentum. We are on a roll. Now, you know, I believe this is the wisdom of the crone. And I think the crone is, you know, if I go back to a book I read many years ago called Intimate Communion by David Dada, the feminine is this wild, untamable energy. It's beautiful in its wildness. You know, the masculine energy is very, very directed, which is what we're all under, this tyranny at the moment, this masculine, directed, pack it up, put it in a box type energy. Whereas ours is this wild unleashing of, you know, I'm present, I'm here, I've arrived, you know, like I know what I feel, I know what I want, I'm creating my heaven on earth around me. So that's our power. That's our power, I think.
No, I'm glad you raised that the feminine doesn't have to be meek and you know, because that's really why I think a lot of women are rejecting the feminine, because the construct of femininity at the moment is so prescriptive, and it's lost its wild roots. It's lost its connection to running with the earth and protecting our world and defending that which matters. I mean, we're going way off piste here, but you know, women who run with wolves is a kind of theme for me. It's like we should have that wild, passionate energy as well as the quietness. It has to be a balance, and you know, I'm passionate about what I believe in. I know you are, and the way that we're individually making a difference here. So, you know, just to wrap up, I guess, any final thoughts for people listening in today about, you know, how you two can heal?
Yeah, I think grace, forgiveness, love, sometimes they're hard to find
Yes.
in yourself, but you are human, you are fully human, and you can find it. And I think be kind to yourself, give yourself a break and relax, let it unfold. You know, all this striving and trying and for perfection and stuff like that, it's kind of like, yeah, you get perfect when you let go and you just take each moment as it comes. Yeah.
Yeah. I have recently said let go to get well, and people find that difficult because they think it's accepting the way things are. But it isn't. It's letting go of the striving, which is part of the problem, because it's a very stressful thing to hold on to, the idea of I must get well. Whereas I am more open to being shown what I need to learn from this episode in my life is a very different feeling, isn't it? So I think that's what we're trying to promote, each in our different ways. It's been an absolute joy talking to you, and thank you so much for being here. I know we could go on for another hour at least, but we promised ourselves we'd keep it to an hour, you know, under the hour. So here we are.
Thanks so much for inviting me to chat with you, because I think we connect in so many different ways, or the same way even. But do you know what I mean? It's lovely. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, it is. And if people want to find you, what's the best way?
I suppose the easiest way is on openmindtherapy.co.uk. So Brilliant. You can find me there. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I hope we can do another at some point in the not too distant future. If people want to comment, obviously I'll be happy to read them. You can find me on alchemytherapies.co.uk. And it remains for me to thank Jenny. Thank you so much for coming and talking to me today. And I hope you know, business continues to expand, which it does seem to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Tricia.
Take care.